dedicated to each and every one of you who appreciate a great glass of wine. You know what I mean?
It's Monday. Let's raise a glass to the beginning of another week. It's time to unscrew, uncork, or saber a bottle, and let's begin exploring the wine glass. Today, I sit down with Mike Sinor, founding winemaker at Ancient Peaks Winery in Paso Robles. How do you go from a boy growing up in Visalia, California, working in your father's automobile wrecking yard, to being a winemaker for a winery that an AVA is named after? What happens in your life to attend Cal Poly wanting to be a high school shop teacher and end up being named 2012 Central Coast Winemaker of the Year? Well, continue listening to hear Mike tell his story.
Sweet.
I want to give a big shout out to Me and My Shadow for leaving this 5-star review. Good stuff. Really well produced and some great information on the wine industry. Congrats. Thank you, Me and My Shadow, for listening and for leaving this fantastic review. This truly is the best way to show support of the podcast and to help let other wine lovers find Exploring the Wine Glass.
Give me the blanche.
Hey everybody, I'm Lori Budd, a UC Davis winemaking program, someday service, champagne specialist, and WSET Level 2 graduate. You can find Exploring the Wine Glass on all the socials, as well as your favorite podcast catchers. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to swipe, subscribe, rate, and review. I promise I'll never tell you what to drink, but I'll always share what's in my glass. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Allure of the Poor, sponsored by Dracaena Wines. I am your host, Lori, UC Davis winemaking program graduate, WSET Level 2 graduate, someday service graduate, and champagne specialist, and Paso all-around proponent. And I am thrilled to have Mike Sinor with me today, who is the winemaker from Ancient Peaks, which honestly is one of our favorite wineries, and we are always visiting there. So welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you for having us.
So first of all, Ancient Peaks, we really do enjoy it. The wines are incredible and the atmosphere in the tasting room is fantastic. But they're not, just for people to realize it, they're actually not in that main section of Paso Robles. You got to do a little drive down the freeway to get there, but well worth the drive. And it's literally like 10 minutes. So it's nothing out of control. So in fact, what is the exit? The street that you get off? Do we know?
It's just the Santa Margarita exit into town.
Yeah.
22 miles south of Paso Robles.
Yeah.
And little town of Margarita got about 1,000 people in it, no stoplights. So it's hard. We're hard to miss.
No, that is true. No stoplights at all. You can just keep going straight to the winery. And is the cow still there?
Oh yeah.
Okay,
Yes, still there. Then we've got the art cows from the cow parades,
Right.
which are these that's still out front too.
Right. So that you can always find them right there. So thank you for joining me, taking time out of your busy day. My first question always in these interviews is the origin story. Everybody has that moment that they were like, you know what? Wine, good stuff. I want to make this my career. So go ahead. Let's hear that origin story.
Yeah, it goes back now a few years, 1991 or so, 92. I went to Cal Poly here, San Luis Obispo. And when going through school, had to work to help pay for school. And I never had wine. I grew up in the San Joaquin Valley in Visalia, California. It's my hometown.
Oh,
and
I'm in Fresno right now, by the way.
Oh, cool. There you go. So I grew up over there. I was no food or wine background. My dad, our family didn't do it. He sold construction equipment, owned a junkyard for a little while. And so, no food or wine background, but moved here to Cal Poly. I studied industrial technology, and a friend of mine was working in the wine business. I was 21. And I thought, hey, that sounds good. I needed money, and got the interview and got the job, and drank my first 3 bottles of wine the night before the interview. So it was random. But once I had that first job, within a few months, I realized how special this business was, and ended up working for 6 wineries, helping put myself through school here in the Edna Valley, vineyards, wineries, tasting rooms. babysitting our kids, house sitting, mowed lawn for them, whatever it took to earn money. And yeah, that's how I got in.
And did you change your major, or did you finish that? And
yeah, I wrote it out. I thought about it. I thought about going back to Fresno State, but then, I've never been to Fresno State, but then my gut was, when I talked to mentors, some of my good friends today have mentored me since then. And everybody said, hey, look, if you want to be a corporate winemaker, you probably need a degree and goes, but I knew I'd be independent at some point. And my style is not corporate. So I knew, I just stuck with it. And I learned so much working with those guys. And then also I had the great opportunity. I started working for Art Mondavi in 1994. So he owned Byron Winery in Santa Maria. So once I got that job, I was like, okay, I'm working with some of the best in the world. I just finished up at Cal Poly and started working at Byron.
Yeah, I'm very happy that we went through UC Davis because I thought it was very educational. But I say it all the time: is the books can't tell you what Mother Nature is going to do. The books can't tell you those spur decisions, on the spur of the moment decisions that you've got to make when you're in the vineyard and things are happening. So it really is a hands-on learning experience.
Yeah. It's good to have that background.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the history of Ancient Peaks. So it was founded by three lifetime or longtime friends, right? So, and they purchased a ranch. That's how they started, correct? What was their thinking back then?
Yeah, so we go back. We started the company in 2006, and so the three families, the Rossis, the Filipponis, and the Whitstroms, three local families. Two of them went to Cal Poly, and they're very, very successful guys, but their passion, two of them, Doug Filipponi and Carl Whitstrom, and actually Rob too, they owned about 1,000-acre vineyard on the east side of Paso Robles, going back to the early 90s. And so they've been farming grapes for a lot of years, and they had the Margarita Ranch. And so in 2001, they partnered up. Now, Rob Rossi has been associated with the Santa Margarita Ranch for almost 30 years as a consultant. But in 2001, he was able to acquire the ranch. And so that's when he brought in his partners, Doug Filipponi and Carl Whitstrom. So the ranch itself is 14,000 acres. Now, at that point, there was no grapes on it, but Robert Mondavi from Napa was on a big acquisition mode to acquire vineyards, land. They were expanding their vineyard holdings. And so meetings occurred. And once Mondavi looked into these soils at the Margarita Ranch, the weather, and they wanted to buy the ranch. And the boys said, hey, we'll lease you something. And so that's what happened. That's how the vineyard got planted, was through negotiating in 99 and really in 01, 99 through 2001 is when the vineyard was planted by Robert Mondavi, because Mondavi had about a 36-year lease on 1,000 acres. So that was the original idea, was the families were going to sit back and just get a lease check every month from these guys. But Robert Mondavi left the wine business for a short period of time. So he sold his company. And then the company who purchased them really didn't want to be growing grapes for a living. They like to market wine. And so in August of 2005, the three families bought the lease back. Oh, okay. And then coming in the vintage of 05 is when they called me. So Doug Filipponi called me. I was the winemaker to, it's called Chamisol today. It used to be called Domaine Alfred. And just got on the phone and started talking, and got together, a couple of meetings, a couple of cups of coffee, and decided to start a company, which is called Ancient Peaks now.
Okay. And that's my next question, is why the name Ancient Peaks?
It's really for the mountains. The vineyard itself is, it's a foothills there, this Santa Lucia mountain range, as it terminates into the Santa Maria River. And so as you're down in the vineyard, it's surrounded by mountains, and those Ancient Peaks was really what has the parent material, for a lot of the soils that we grow in. And just sitting out there in the vineyard, because again, we've got about 1,000 acres of vineyards, but you can't see any roads, highways, and you can't see it from the road. Well, actually, we have some new planties now. You can see a little tiny block, but for the most part, you can be in this vineyard, look 360 degrees, not see anything but mountains. And so it really, when you're there, you see it, and you definitely feel it.
And like I said, I've been to the winery loads of times, but where exactly is this? Where is the ranch in relation to the winery?
Yeah, so you know Paso. So the town of Santa Margarita is actually inside the ranch. It's a very unique situation. So when you exit the 101 to come on to go to Santa Margarita town, you're on the ranch itself. The ranch is on both sides of the road.
Oh. Okay.
So just south of the town of Santa Margarita, by, a quarter mile, the vineyard starts, and it goes back about 6 miles.
Okay. Yeah, I've never actually been to the vineyard. I mean, I guess physically been in the vineyard, but I guess I have been driving through the ranch without even knowing it. And I guess that's why there's no lights or anything, right? We don't want that in.
Yeah, it's a weird relationship. The town was actually Patrick. What was his name? Patrick Murphy owned the ranch in the 1800s, and he actually gave away the 200 acres to form the town for free. And then he gave that land to the Union Pacific Railroad. And so on the Santa Margarita Ranch, as long as they put a spur on the ranch, because his money was selling cattle from the Santa Margarita Cattle Company to the beef for the 49ers up in Northern California. So he wanted his own spur to go through his ranch, and they agreed to that. And so he gave them the land for free, and they auctioned off the lots that you see today to raise money to cut the tunnels through the Cuesta grade. So the Northern and Southern California was connected on the Santa Margarita Ranch in 1880, and that's the year the town was formed.
Oh, so now I guess that is my answer to my next question, because on the website it says the Margarita Ranch is steeped in Mission era history and Wild West mythology. So I'm guessing that's, being able to cut through the Cuesta Pass. That's the Mission era history, but do we know what the Wild West mythology is?
Yeah, there's all sorts of stuff. I mean, it even goes back. There's a arrowhead dated 10,000 years ago, found on the ranch today in the Santa Barbara History of Natural Museum of History. So that's Cro-Magnon, right? That's early. Wow. As far as the phase as well, Junipero Serra. So if you grew up in California, the 26 missions, and so there's a building on the ranch called an Asistencia. So the Asistencia is a small mission building in between two missions. And so the general idea is each one of those missions are supposed to be one day's travel apart, but some of those travels are pretty serious travels, such as going up the Cuesta grade. So those friars built a small building that's still there today called an Asistencia. So that's that era. And then forward from that, Jesse, I'm sure if you're in Pasos, the Paso Robles Inn, and that started by Drury James. So Jesse James' uncle. And so Jesse James reportedly came through. He got shot up and he rested here near his uncle's ranch up in Paso, but he came through the Margarita and kind of hung out for a bit. So that's kind of some of the old stuff there.
And do you know anything? I had never heard of this before, and then I read it somewhere, and of course I was like in a rush, and I'm like, okay, I'll come back to that, and then I couldn't find it again. Tunnels that Jesse James went through? Is that news to you too? Maybe I was dreaming it. That's why I couldn't find it again.
You know what? Carl is one of the owners. He's kind of our historian. Boy, I love going out with him because I always learn more stories. He's always discovering stories. So I'll ask him up and follow up and see if there's from Jesse James tunnels.
Yeah, something about tunnels that he was running through or whatever, and then I literally couldn't find it again. So it is a distinct possibility that I dreamt it and then couldn't. That's why I couldn't find it. But sometimes I have very vivid dreams. All right, so you started talking about Ancient Peaks in 2000, or you started working in 2006. And what was the winery you said you started at?
Well, I started in 91 working for small brands in the Edna Valley, like Sausalito Canyon, Claiborne and Churchill.
Oh, okay.
Pierre Free. But then in fast forward to 2006, I was working at Chamisol Winery.
Okay.
And they Doug called me just to ferment some grapes from them. They had extra grapes. There's a large vintage. So I ended up fermenting 100 tons for them. And then we just got talking. And together we started a company. And today that company, became Ancient Peaks, basically.
Okay. Oh, so that's what, you lead me right into my next questions because it says founding winemaker. So I was like, all right, that's a new one. I don't know what a founding winemaker is. So you actually are part of Ancient Peaks development.
Yes, from the very beginning to yes. It was the three families were not really in the wine business before we started together. And so they had grown grapes for many years. They're amazing business guys. But together we started this company. And so I go back to before we had the word Ancient Peaks in the company yet. So we formed it all together. And as the winemaker in charge of winemaking, and But most of the time, almost all the time, Stuart Cameron was my assistant winemaker. And about some years ago now, 3-4 years ago, we promoted him to winemaker. So that's really where that title comes in. Stuart really runs the day-to-day operations, which allows me to be in the vineyards with Jaime Munoz, our vineyard manager, just checking in with Stuart, and help with sales, and just being that, I guess, the old guy now. I look around, I'm like, I used to be the kid around here. But yeah,
right.
I'm so old. So.
Right. I remember when you looked around and everybody was older than you, and now all of a sudden, now they're looking at me as the old person. Another really cool thing about Ancient Peaks is that not only is the Santa Margarita Ranch, but it's also the AVA. So, like, how cool is that the AVA is named after your area, your ranch?
Yeah, we're super honored by that. I mean, but it just goes to the uniqueness of what Santa Margarita Ranch and Ancient Peaks is. Back, I guess it was 2014, I believe, or maybe 17. I forget the exact year, but the Paso Wine Alliance got together and petitioned to have nestled AVAs within the Paso AVA. So first and foremost, we're Paso. But, the idea of having the east side, west side divided by the 101 was ridiculous. Everybody knows the AVAs were kind of invented in the spirit of the AOC from France. And you need to have, weather differences, soil differences. And for your name, you have to have historical presence. It has to be something historical that goes back a long time. And that's really where the Santa Margarita Ranch sub AVA came in, because that ranch has direct ties, written history going back to the 1700s still here. So that it was just a happenstance, but again, another unique aspect to Ancient Peaks and Santa Margarita Ranch.
And now you also have a second vineyard, the Margarita Vineyard, it's
the same one. We're it's the Santa Margarita Ranch. We have a Santa Margarita Vineyard, but the brand is called Ancient Peaks.
Okay.
So yeah. Okay. So like you'll with our entry level wines, we don't put a state bottle on there. We could, but for our white label, for our we call Pearl Collection, our reserve wines, you will see that vineyard designation on the bottle itself.
Okay, wonderful. And then, so all of your fruit is estate? You don't source from anything?
Correct. Yeah, that is correct. We're net sellers, so we're selling fruit to people, good friends here locally. People from Napa come down. So we only bottle about 1/3 of what we grow to Ancient Peaks. So that really is a key part of, if we've had success, is that, from our perspective in wine making and growing, we get to go out there and just, have the cut of the beef, and get know the blocks as well as we do, and be able to utilize what we want to utilize, and then share it with everything else we want to do with everybody else in terms of selling fruit.
And how many varieties are under vine?
Got about 16 different varieties. Yeah,
mostly red.
Yeah, mostly red. Our whites include Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc. Right now, that's all we had. A little bit of Muscat is still there, and so we've had Roussan, that's gone, and that's what for the whites. The reds are pretty Bordeaux heavy. Cabernet, Merlot. We've got some Zen, Syrah, too. Petit Verdot, Malbec. Verdot and Malbec are probably. We have a lot of that for as far as total acreage, again, everything's on a 14,000 acre ranch. Everything's just bigger. It's like Texas, and so, we just went and bought some quads. We bought 5 quads at one time, and so everything's bigger. So we look at Malbec and Petit Verdot. We've got like 40 acres of each of those varietals planted,
Oh my gosh. That's going to be like the highest number in.
It's big. Yeah. In fact, I did a heavy dive for a rural seminar. I was a guest of the Iwani Lodge in Yosemite, and me and Dan Berger from LA Times, he was a moderator, and so I was there representing Ancient Peaks. And so I did a real lengthy discussion on Verdot and Malbec. And that year, I think that was, I forget the year it was, but we owned that ranch. Margarita here had like 9% of all the Malbec in California. So
yeah, that's crazy. That is crazy.
Significant. And we got small amounts we just put in some new Italian stuff. So that hasn't even come into the winery yet. So we're playing with some Sangiovese, a little bit of Nebbiolo coming online next year.
That seems to be a new up and coming concept for Paso. More people are planting Italian varieties and things. I get,
Yeah, I think there was definitely some pioneers a while ago. Martin Brothers back in the day. I can remember it being kind of focused on it. But yeah, there's been some young brands, Jornada in particular.
Right.
There's some great wine. So we're excited about it. I think, I know Stuart Cameron, that was one of his projects. He's really passionate about Italian wine. So we're like, yeah, all right, let's get some in the ground and see what we can do. Again, those are what we're not going to distribute those products. So we're very focused on what we distribute and how we go to market. So one of the things we don't do is have a lot of SKUs. For a company of our size, we only have 5 SKUs we sell in the country. That's it.
Oh, okay.
So, but 16 plus varietals and all sorts of level of quality. But when we go to market for wholesale, it's very focused. Whereas that small stuff I'm speaking to is you got to be a wine club member. You got to come in and taste some of the specialty wines. Right.
And I think that's another thing that is the positive of Paso is how different varieties that can grow well in Paso, and I think that's one of the things that makes Paso, in addition to the people, because I think the people are better than any other wine region ever. But like, just, you can grow what you want, and it grows well, and the soil accepts so many different varieties in Paso. And that's not true in a lot of wine regions.
Without a doubt. I mean, it really goes back to geology and location and having these two tectonic plates. You've got the Pacific tectonic plate going underneath the North American continental plate. And it just leads to diversity of soil profile in a very short period of time. I mean, you're in Fresno, and I know the San Joaquin very well, but it's pretty standard soil profile. Super high organic material, whites, some of the best vegetables and tree fruits in the whole world. But it's not very diverse, not very dynamic. Whereas on the coast here, we got all these different soil types, and then we got all these hills. And so all these different facings and stuff, the temperatures are amazing. I mean, within Paso, you got, Windward, Pinot Noir doing a great job. Right next to him is Stefano Sejo, and so just little tiny hills, these great different soils really leads to that diversity, which is definitely a hallmark for this area.
Right. And in your AVA, you're actually a Winkler scale too. So that, for those who are listening to Winkler scale is how we determine, the temperature of the region basically on the days. But 2 is cold. 2 is pretty darn cold. So it's the Santa Lucia Mountains that do that. Can you talk about how your location, like, what's your, how does that impact your vineyard sites?
Certainly. Yeah, it is a major aspect of life in Margarita. It is a cold spot in Paso. We're the only sub-AVA that doesn't even touch another sub-AVA. As I said before, we're 22 miles south of Paso. We're 14 miles to the ocean. As the crow flies, about 8 miles to the Edna Valley AVA. So we really are pushing the edge in some of these Bordeaux varietals. Again, to an example, back when we got together in 2006, one of the first things we did, we had block 33, 34, and 35 were all Cabernet, and it never got ripe. It was struggling for ripeness. So we grafted it to Pinot Noir, and boom, we put in 60 acres of Pinot Noir. So, and it's done well. So it is definitely on the edge of ripeness, in terms of being able to fully ripen Bordeaux varietals. But one of our mantras, and we hear it a lot, but it's a very true aspect of the wine business. It's something I great fortune of going to Europe twice with Robert Mondavi Company. In France, is when you're on the edge of ripeness is where you achieve greatness, because that's where it's hard to ripen. And when things are easy to ripen, they're interesting, but they're not as complex. They might be good, they might be more consistent, but when you're on the edge of ripeness is where you can really achieve really interesting things. And when you think about France, in particular Burgundy, when you go down south in Pouilly-Fuissé, it makes some good Chardonnay. It's nice. Côte-Nuit and Côte-d'Or, it's pretty interesting. Chablis gets really extreme. Up to Champagne, you're just changing what you're doing because you no longer can fully bring into ripeness to what you're trying to do. And so it is definitely a challenge in Margarita. We have frosts twice a year. So we frost in the normal time period in terms of springtime, late spring frosts, but we frosted in September's and October's too. So it is a challenging spot to grow grapes. And again, no longer do we have a second vineyard in ownership. The guys used to have 1,000 acres on the east side of Paso Robles. So, we're a team running 1,000-acre vineyards, and out there it was nothing. Everything was so much easier. Your pressures were less for mildew. Ripeness was just easy and came in really early. And whereas the margarita is definitely challenges, but at the end of the day, that's really why it's the absolute highest reason for the success of Ancient Peaks is its location of vineyard.
And so when are you harvesting till? What's your last thing that you're bringing in, and when is that?
Yeah, we've gone almost into December before, definitely that year in 06, it was after Thanksgiving when they call. So yeah, again, these last 5 years, 10 years, we've seen a lot of change. Of weather has changed a lot, but it's nothing for Paso to be past 50% completed in the bar, harvested off the vine, and then we get started. So yeah, it's a long one.
Wow. So I have said multiple times that I absolutely love your tasting room. And one of the things that I think is fantastic about the tasting room, which you guys have transferred over to your bottles, is that the cylinders of the soils that you have at the ranch.
Yeah.
And
yes.
So for those who are watching, okay, on the back of their labels, they have these soil types. And if you go into the tasting room, they've got these big fat cylinders filled with these soils. So can you, and by the way, this is the Renegade. Okay, this is the Renegade. So this is a Malbec, a Syrah, Malbec, Petit Verdot, Zinfandel, and Petit Syrah blend. So you want to tell us a little bit about Renegade and then talk about these lovely soils in the back of your labels. And I'm going to
certainly
you doing that.
Renegade's a fun wine. Our first vintage was 09 with that. We had a Syrah before that, but we changed it into a red blend. And so Amanda Whitstrom Higgins, who's our vice president of all operations, and she came to winemaking and said, "Hey guys, do a blend, but it has to be based on Syrah, but use whatever you want to finish it." So that's where it'll always be the majority varietal will always be Syrah for us. But then we started getting into Verdots, Malbecs, Zins. We've done Merlot in there. We'll put anything in there. We just want to make a great wine. It's fun. And what's great about Renegade for us from a winemaking perspective is that one of our, over in the varietal category for us, the Cabs and Merlot, the Zins, having varietal typicity is very important to us. It's part of our founding mantra in terms of bringing forth the varietal correctness. We really saw we just see so often people are pushing ripeness or oak influence to push a wine into it to get recognized, and not so much varietal typicity. And so we really work with that within our wines. But then with Renegade, we can push ripeness a little bit. We get to that kind of little heavier structured blend wines. That's a little more creative in winemaking. As far as the soils on the ranch, it's really what we focus on. We don't do a lot of clonal work, and I think that stuff's all been played out pretty well. So we're really focused on what the flavor aspects and what comes of each soil type. And so we really felt it was important to reflect onto each bottle. So for each varietal and where we predominantly gotten the grapes from, is you'll see that down to the exact soil profile. We have 5 distinctive soil profiles we've identified on the ranch. And so when we go to put those blends together, that's where we look up. And each consumer can turn that bottle around, and on that bottle is going to tell you exactly what soils it came from. So that for us is kind of, it's just talking and communicating to that geeky person who really wants to know exactly where their wine's coming from, but yet deliver it in a price point that you can drink every day. And
so as I'm tasting this, I think on the nose, it's very much a Syrah, and it's 37%, but on the nose, it's very much Syrah. It's got that like meatiness to it, that gaminess to it, but it is staining my glass. It is staining my glass. So I'm going to go with a little Petit Syrah, and Petit Verdot is doing that. That gives it the body, or the color, I mean, but it's beautiful. It's the, by the nose, I definitely would say it's Syrah. I don't know if you have an opinion of what's giving what to the aromas.
Yeah, what's really fun about Margarita Syrah is, and again, think about Syrah. Syrah is one of those varietals that can do really well in both extremes, right? When you take a Cabernet planted when it's really cold, doesn't do too well, right? Pinot Noir planted when it's super hot, doesn't do well. But Syrah, you can have cold climate Syrah and warm climate Syrah. And so for margarita, a lot of that color is coming from the base Syrah in the glass.
Really?
And so,
Okay.
it's not like cold climate Syrah, like coming out of Santa Rita Hills or Edna Valley. But it's certainly not a Paso Robles Syrah, as far as the warmth to it. So it's right in between. And for me, I think that's a big part of the flavor of that wine is coming through for me.
The Zin, there's I think on the palate, there's a little Zin because there's that little hint of kick in there that I think that your Zin always has. Like
that
your
spice.
Zin. Yeah, that little spice.
Yeah. Zin's been a great one for us. Our Zin is definitely, just because of the ranch, it has a little different, it lines up pretty differently in the marketplace. It's more of an old school claret style. It doesn't have that weight sauce. That white pepper, black pepper kind of thing on the Zin really comes through too.
And I mean, I don't have the Zin. We'll talk about the other wines, but that Zin I think is by far one of the top everyday wines that everybody should have in their house, because it is a killer wine. I mean, I don't know if you know what it retails for, but it is like so affordable for the quality that you're getting out of that.
Yeah, it retails around 20, but
20.
Wine clubbers are getting that stuff for $18. That's how we started the whole company. Again, in 2006, that's 2 years after Sideways, and no one was starting anything for value, and so it was certainly unheard of at that time period in our business. Nobody was starting projects, but these guys have a lot of resources, got a big ranch, and it was interesting to come to market with the wines. And then suddenly in 2008, 9, when the economy just went to heck, it really blew up Ancient Peaks because people bought down. It's like we saw with this pandemic. People are they drinking more alcohol? Yeah, they are. Unfortunately, they are. And they're drinking down.
Right.
And Ancient Peaks is that wine you can afford every day. So that's what we started off doing. I love hearing people say that.
Yeah, and I think it has the quality of what every wine drinker wants. Is all right. So it's $20, but it tastes like 50. And it's so much better when it's in that direction than the other direction, right?
Yeah. When you look at our scores, reviews and stuff, that's often, we're just getting, for quality price ratio. I mean, that's exactly right. When we line up our wines, we have some reserve wines. We've got Oyster Ridge at $60 a bottle or something. And we go head to head with people from Napa anywhere. And we always do really well. And that's really the Ancient Peaks. The take home and what people really know us for is just over delivering. And, that's at that price point, you got a wine that's one vineyard, certified, sustainable, family owned, and now we've got a few years putting it in. So we do have a track record.
And now a word from our sponsor. Looking to be in the know about Dracaena wines? Want to be the first to know about our new releases and special offers? All you need to do is sign up for our newsletter. There is no commitment necessary, and I promise you we won't spam your mailbox with loads of messages. Need another reason to sign up? Quite possibly the best reason? You'll immediately get a discount code for 10% off your first purchase and be privy to newsletter-only discounts. Let Dracaena Wines turn your moments into great memories. Visit our website, www.dracaenawines.com, or use the link in show notes to sign up. It will take you less than a minute, but the rewards will last a lifetime.
So of these 5 soil types that you have, which in its own right is so unique that you've got one ranch that's got all of these, right? Normally it's, this AVA has this soil type, this AVA has this soil type, wherever you are. But you've got these 5 soil types within your one ranch. So how was it trial and error? Like, what are you planting on the ancient seabed? And, what are you planting in the shale? Or you got a whole bunch of varieties in that so that they can express themselves differently? What's the logic behind your plantings?
Yeah, we don't really have, as we're putting new stuff under vine, mostly it's redevelopment. We only have one kind of block we've planted fresh. It's not so much about matching the varietals to the soil types, but it's more about having diversity. So with a given area, we're not just going to put Cab or Merlot in. We're going to put a little bit of a few different grapes there. So for me, it's about having the diversity and having all those soil components represented through one varietal in the end. So it's layers of complexity. That's really what we see, and we see that some of these clones, some of these plantings come earlier, some of them come out later, and it just brings a complexity to the wine. It's derived right back to this having diversity of soil. So I think to me, it's always about diversity versus just having that one singular flavor.
And that's what's going to add to the dimension in the wine. That's what's going to, so each time you take that sip, there's something different that you can find in that wine.
Exactly. And Stuart and I are tasting wines. It's, we got Cabernet on every soil. Cabernet is so strong. We have so many acres of it. We have it on every soil profile. Some of it replicated, row orientations also. So yeah, it is just, it's amazing how different. Again, the vineyard, it is unique. I mean, it's 6 miles tip to tip. So there is a lot of different slightly different weather experiences. But yeah, it brings the complexity and diversity. The diversity is bringing the complexity.
It's a good thing you've got those quads now. 6 miles, yeah. Get a good workout. Huh?
Yeah. There's something to get on that. Yeah, just to go take hours, and then you go fix a machinery, and then suddenly you're like, oh my gosh, you forget your shop, and it's wild west stuff out there.
That's wonderful. That's actually pretty cool. So going back to the Renegade, okay, with all of these soil types and all of the variations of your plantings within these soil types, take me through your blending trials for Renegade. So I'm assuming everything is fermented independently. You're not co-fermenting anything, or are you?
No, it's pretty much independent. Okay. We've got co-fermenting small experiments going on, but from a strategic perspective, they're pretty separate. And so, yeah, what we're going to do, we're blending it, starting pruning, right? I mean, because in order to be in business, you've got to be sustainable, and the first rule of sustainability is making a profit. So we're thinking about it in the beginning because we're going to do different crop loads based on price point. So that's really where it gets started. And all throughout the year, we're going to invest more money in the blocks that we think is going to go in Renegade. It's a little more expensive wine. So therefore we can spend a little bit more on the cost of goods. And so we're going to try to do some better viticulture to certain areas for that. And then when it comes to the kind of the normal think about blending of a wine, Stuart and I are going to really take a deep dive in Syrah, taste every Syrah we have, and just put a food chain together. We call it food chain in it. So we say, this is our best one. And then sometimes we will break out Syrah into a small bottling for wine club, So we've got some pretty cool different Syrahs. We've had some whole cluster Syrah. We've done 100% whole cluster. And we've done jackpot Syrah, which is really ripe. And it's just one of those big, heavier style ones. But we're going to food chain it. Maybe we're going to, if it's really inspiring, we might take a couple of 100 cases to the wine club. And then we get to that volume where we feel really comfortable in 100%. Because before that, they've got to give us what is needed for the next vintage volume wise. Then we taste that wine and ask ourselves, okay, how can we improve this wine? And so in certain years, for a lot of times, it's Petit Verdot. Malbec have been really the supporting cast for that wine. But in certain years, Zinfandel's been a great support to it. So we're just trying to make that wine better with the ability to kind of think outside the box more, so not having that varietal typicity as a design parameter. And so that's how we do it. We start with Syrah, find the best of the best, and then we sell off a lot of stuff. We're selling Syrah to other people as bulk wine, and so we have that ability to make that food chain and take away anything that's not of the quality that we like to see. And then we're just going to add the other varietals and see where it goes from there.
So it's like mad science. I try to explain to people what it's like, right? You're like, okay, well this year, and that's what's nice, I think, when you do like something like a Renegade, is because you're Syrah based, but you're not tied in to the other varieties being in there. So some years you may have Zin, right? Some years you may not, right? And your percentages change. So it's kind of like play day, play days, I'm guessing, with your, how many you've got.
Yeah, for sure. It is about being creative, about looking forward and seeing potential, and having an open-mindedness to try new things. That's really important. I think sometimes we can get in these ruts in life where, we just got a good score, 93 or something on that wine, and let's do that same blend again. It's like, no. That's that weather, that's that vintage. And so we've got to remain open to having it even better than that. So it is. Renegade is probably the most creative one we deal with. And the Oyster Ridge too. We have a Cabernet based, very expensive wine. And so those are probably the funnest to work with because they're not there generally are not varietal on the label. So you really can get creative and a little more of that mad scientist experience.
Right. So let's go into one of your varietals. You have Cabernet Sauvignon. Okay.
Yeah.
This is your Cab Sauv. Tell us about this wine, how you get to that. And then I also have a question. 35 North, 120 West. You got to tell me what that is.
Those are GPS coordinates. Again, we love having minutia details that not everybody can put on their labels. You know, I mean, that's a level of details that anybody who's out there buying fruit or buying bulk wine, they're not going to be able to tell you your latitude and longitude of where your vineyard's at. So that just sort of represents how specific we are in what we do. Cabernet Sauvignon it's our lead varietal. It is for Paso Robles, but something I'm very proud of with the ownership team at Ancient Peaks is when we got started, we definitely took in some advice from people. I come from winemaking, grape growing. That's what I do. But I don't come from a real sales background. So we did bring in some advisement. We got pretty quick with a large distributor in California. And the president of that company really wanted us to focus on Zinfandel and Syrah, did not want us to do Cabernet Sauvignon. This is back in 06. We're showing the 05 wines. And so Cabernet really hadn't kicked up as much as you see today. And so we heard that from them, but we came home and tasted and just made our own decision. We said, you know what, we're going to focus on Cab. You know, his perspective, he is a very Napa based person, as a lot of people in this business are. And he really hadn't seen Cabernet of this style coming out of Paso Robles, you know? And so we just felt it was unique and we just really wanted to focus on it. So I'm very happy that we stood on our own guard and really looked at what we owned and decided to make that the focus varietal. And the industry has really come along, and luckily Cabernet is definitely king as far as sales. So that really helps to not have some eclectic, you know, it's fun to make Tyrol to go on like Rhine, but it's, you don't want to be doing too much volume of that stuff.
Okay. And now this wine comes from ancient seabed, rocky alluvium, and shale. So I think most people can figure out ancient seabed, right? I mean, that's a lot of it. Rocky alluvium. So what is alluvium and what makes it rocky?
Yeah, so rocky alluviums are like basically another word for it is rubble. So it's usually a minimum 2 to 4, as many as it could be, different soil profiles that have come together in a lower spot. So it's more like those alluvial fans is what I'm speaking to. So basically, through erosion, you gain this material that's pretty diverse, you know, and since it's low, it historically generally has had some rivers going through it prehistorically. So there's a lot of rock to it. So that's what those rocky alluviums are, is just rock and combinations of different soil profiles without one singular parent material. Whereas your ancient seabed is oyster shells we have. That's the parent material. And it is very one style, you know, a granitic that's the parent material. So rocky alluviums are several that have come together. So that's what the rocky alluviums are. And then the shale is speaking to Monterey shale, which is pretty common here on the Central Coast of California. And it does really well for wines. You know, it has nice porosity. The actual stratified shales themselves hold water really nicely, kind of like limestone does, where it brings water in and it releases it much slower than when it percolating through the soil itself. So you'll find that when you have that really light soils that percolate very quickly, yet those shale will help maintain water, which is a great benefit for the grapes.
Excuse me. And now the wine, the vineyard itself, you had kind of mentioned it a little bit, but I want to get into it more, is SIP certified. So can you explain, I mean, that I love hearing that. So can you explain to my listeners what SIP certified is, and a little bit, because it is entailed, what is required in order to be SIP certified?
Certainly. So SIP certification is a sustainability in practice. So that's what the acronym is. So when you think about ecological farming, you know, you basically historically 3 different components, right? You've got organic vineyard, you might have a biodynamic vineyard, and a sustainable vineyard. No one talks about conventional. Nobody brags about they spray all chemicals, but a lot of people do. But so let's run down that for everybody. So organics is, you know, generally in California, CCOF is your certifying agency, and they just give you a list of materials that you're allowed to use. End of story. That's it. So if you use nothing but these materials on your property, then you're fine. in 3 years you're certified. With biodynamics, it requires you at least you have certification in organics, and then on top of that, you have to use the philosophies and the executions that put forth by Rudolf Steiner in his lecture in 1924. So it's kind of organic and a little bit beyond that. Sustainability, what really attracted us to that was it's a little bit bigger of a worldview. It's taught in sustainability and getting certified sustainable. Yes, they want to know our water usage. They want to know how we're reducing that. They want to know what we're doing to reduce passes to the vineyard, to conserve on materials. But they're going to ask you, they also ask you, what have you done for education for your employees? What's your pay rate industry average? Do you recycle in the office? So it's more of a tutorial, I think a bigger worldview of it, of what's going on in that farming operation. And there's flexibility there too. If you have to use a material, they're going to take you through a process of saying, okay, how, you've got something you got to deal with. You can deal with it at a small level, but they don't want to see, absolutely, just carpet spray everything. We've got maybe some, leaf hopper issues. The old guard or people who don't have that environmental bent might just spray the whole vineyard for leaf hoppers. Whereas if you've got a major outbreak in the sustainability program, you're going to put more eyes in the field, and then you're going to identify exactly where it's coming from, and maybe spot treat that. So you get downgraded in points, but it doesn't kick you out of the program. So that's a nice flexibility to it, to get you to, put you in that sustainable realm, and for 1,000 acres, we feel that's where we need to be, and we really enjoy being in the program.
And that's not easy work, especially at 1,000 acres. That's not easy work. It's a lot of paying attention to what's going on to make the vineyard a better place for everything.
Without a doubt. And that's really the first rule of anything ecologically farming, is you've got to change your own perspective, your own personal worldview, and how you look at things. And so, we think it makes better wine. We think it makes better environment for our people to work in, and that's why we do it.
Awesome. And now the last wine that we're going to talk about is your Chardonnay. Okay.
Yeah.
So 2019 Chardonnay. Is this 100% Chard? Yes, it is.
It is 100% Chardonnay. It's approximately 4% tank fermented, plus or minus. So, and then we kind of got definitely down as far as style with that wine. That is the newest wine that we're distributing nationally. Okay. And so it was been really fun. Amanda and her sales crew really put Stuart and I through the ringer. We tasted a couple of hundred Chardonnays over the course of a few weeks, every price point, but just tons of them. And just sort of really every wine before that was just kind of like a startup mode. We're just doing it. Whereas Chardonnay was really thought out. I thought it was really great experience to go through. And so, and again, it's a varietal that, you don't think of Chardonnay and Paso Robles too often, but again, it really shows how cool we are in Paso Robles. And we spent a lot of time taking it to market. We probably made Chardonnay for 4 to 5 years before we actually distributed one that we were comfortable with. We felt that the combination of quality, price point was there for us. So mostly tank fermented, a little bit of barrel ferment, but all off the estate.
Okay, so it is, you have 5 months in stainless steel, which is 70%, and then 30% French oak. Is that a combined of new French oak and neutral, or is it all neutral, all new?
It's a combination of both. Yeah, the oak program. We've got some barrel fermented. We do another Chardonnay called on the Pearl Collection. So that one's got a lot of new oak. We use Demi as our preferred cooperage out of the village of Merceau. And so, those barrel fermented lots, we'll go through those lots. Again, food chain, like I said earlier, find the best of the best. That gets bottled as the Pearl Collection Chardonnay, which is in the tasting room only. And then that other component, we'll lay that into the tank fermented and stuff and just see where we're at. That percentage is going to really, it bounces around a little bit depending on the vintage and how it's expressing itself through Chardonnay.
And now I just found out when we first started talking by looking in your background that you do also make a sparkling. So we need to share the information about your sparkling.
We do, yeah. In Ancient Peaks, we just started playing with it. Boy, the ownership talked about it years ago when we started, but we held them off and said, "Hey guys, let's get focused." But as the company's grown, Stuart's got a great team he's working with, and we felt it was time to start to experiment with that. So, a couple of vintages ago, we started making some sparkling wines, and so we're going to have we're going to be launching 2 separate wines here this year. Again, very small volume wine club, pretty much, you got to buy it at our place, but we're going to kind of have a nice reserve style one with longer in barrel, more of that rich, creamy style. And then one's lighter, fruitier. Pinot one's has Pinot Noir as its base and one has Chardonnay as its base. So both done in method Champenois technique. But yeah, something new on the horizon for
that is awesome. And that brings in like a whole other ball game into the winery. I mean, that's like a whole other process, winemaking process to deal with sparkling wine and pet, or pet nats or whatever. I mean, nervous, excited, combination of both. Like it's a whole different ball game.
It really is. I'm not a very technical winemaker. I never have been. I'm very focused on grapes and the techniques I picked up in my travels, and it's very old world in what I do. And so I've stayed away from champagne. I just rather buy it. Same with port. I'd rather buy port and buy champagne. I don't want to make it. But I started with Pétrole Naturel, pet nats in 2015 and gained personal experience, for 3 or 4 years before we launched the program in Ancient Peaks. So we feel comfortable doing it now, and but we'll see. I think it's something we're all excited about. So, but rubber meets the road is when you get it out there and you get the public to taste it. So hopefully, sometime this year, we'll get to taste the first sparkling wine from Ancient Peaks.
Fantastic! I can't wait. I will be in line for that tasting. All right, so we're almost out of time, but I want to get into a little bit because in addition to just making exceptional wines, you guys also have Oyster Ridge and then the Margarita Adventures. And so it's like a come for wine and stay for so much more. So you want to just give a little bit more information about that?
Oh, certainly. It's part of these guys owning a 14,000 acre ranch, and they're the first families in the history of the ranch. And again, I guess, the recent history, when I say recent, I'll call it early 1800s. They're the first owners of the ranch to actually work the ranch themselves. So every other owner had owned it from afar, whether it was up in San Francisco, out in Texas, other people owned it and just sort of had it run by someone. So they're here working and doing it themselves. And to that end, it's about creating revenue streams. And these guys, they're very successful business guys. So like the zipline company, Carl Whitstrom was the guy that really headed up from ownership. And it started off as a big boy toy. What do you do when you own a 14,000 acre ranch? He built a zipline. Well, again, it's Margarita, it's Carl. So it ended up, his first line was, 160 foot off the ground and huge. It was one of the most massive zip lines, is massive. And now there's 6 separate zip lines, and Margarita Adventures is its own standalone company. It's got its own employees, and it's got all these Hummers, and it's now a 2.5 hour tour, and is really a destination. And the governor of California gave him an award for tourism. It was such a unique experience. And so that has been great. The other one is Oyster Ridge Barn, and was just the idea of sharing the ranch. The zip line and the barn is kind of that same thing. Agriculturalists, and as you know from the San Joaquin Valley, a lot of time agriculturists are not that good at telling their stories. And so we really worked on that. And so that zip line, we worked a lot of that zip line and the Oyster Ridge Barn into telling the story of agriculture in Santa Margarita Ranch. And so it's a great wedding venue. Basically, it's a beautiful barn. It's totally outrigged and it's built for speed for big parties and big weddings. So it's smack dab right in the middle of the vineyard. In fact, it's one of the, I know it's one of the most beautiful spots in the whole ranch. And so that barn has been obviously pre-COVID, and luckily pandemic seems to be, is winding down. We will be back to normal here. It's going to get back. And so it feels like in this year, things are starting to happen. So a great place to have a wedding, have a party, and enjoy outdoors, wine, and good friends.
And with the pandemic, you guys do have that little bit of outdoor space that wrap around porch or whatever. So I'm assuming you're doing tastings, and now we're opening up all over. So how can people come taste Ancient Peaks?
Yeah, come on in. You can walk in, see there's a table available. You can call ahead for reservation, but we got quite a bit of seating outdoors. And so, yeah, just come on in and see what's available. If it's weekends, it's always better to call ahead and make some reservations, but walk-ins is there too. So, and we have a cafe that still continues to operate. So
good. So good.
Oh yeah. They're doing a great job in there. And those grab and go things really helped us turn the hardcore lockdown. People just, grabbed a couple of dinners and a couple of bottles, went home. So, the cafe's operating, and we're pouring wine outdoors. So.
And it's nice because you've got your front porch area that's got a few seats on it, but then it wraps around into the larger area.
It does. Yeah. I don't know the exact seating number outside, but it's a good 40, 20 to 40. Yeah. More than 20. Yeah. It's a good area for sure. And last year they installed misters too. So when it gets hot for the summer, everybody nice and keep everybody cool.
Fantastic. And then just last, where can they find Ancient Peaks on social media?
Just Google Ancient Peaks, and
they're everywhere.
I'm pretty sure we feed Instagram, and that populates Facebook, and I think it populates Twitter. Instagram is a great place to stay up with what's going on. I mean, or the team, Amanda's got her team, and they just do a rocking job. So everything's quite a bit up to date and pretty robust. Website is solid. I get that feedback from my wholesale friends or dragging the bag, selling the wines out there around the country, that all the information's there. We really make it really easy to people to acquire that information. So quick Google search, you should find everything you need.
Okay. And then the Renegade is tasting room only or club, or is that out in distribution?
That is one of the distributed wines. So you'll find 46 states around the country.
Okay, wonderful. And they can just go online and place an order. And as long as they're not in freezing Texas or New Jersey, New York, the shipping can go.
You bet. Yeah, we ship to almost every state. It's definitely a robust, that type of company. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you taking your time to share all the information about Ancient Peaks and the wines. And this Renegade is absolutely beautiful. Here's a label one more time. And I really do love how there's just so much information and easily to understand so much information on the labels. It really does show that not only are you proud of the wine, but you're proud of the area. You're proud of the grapes. You're proud of everything that goes into that bottle. And you're claiming this is my stuff. And that's what's fantastic, And it really is, it is beautiful. It's got so much, it's opening up. I had just opened it right before, but it's got so much dark fruit and blueberry and dark cherry and all of that in it. And each time you taste it, as you saw, I was like tasting as you were talking, it just gives you a little bit more. It's even now, it has a little bit of chocolate coming out of it. So it is a lovely, lovely wine. And we will be diving into the other two bottles, and they will be going on social media. But thank you so much for taking your time. Okay. And I appreciate you sharing your knowledge and your information about Ancient Peaks.
Well, Laura, thank you for having us on. We really appreciate you and you telling all these great stories about wine, man. It's great to get that out there. We really appreciate being part of it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Have a great day.
You too.
This has been another episode of Exploring the Wine Glass. Thanks for listening. If you have suggestions on what topics you would like me to discuss, please reach out on social media. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook as Exploring the Wine Glass. I am also on LinkedIn as Lori Hoytbud. Of course, you can always email me at exploringthewineglass@gmail.com. If you enjoyed what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe to help others find me more easily. And most importantly, tell your wine-loving friends, because if you like the podcast, they will too. Music is Wine by Kevens. Until next week, sláinte.
Give me the sweet wine. Give me the wine.